Former Secretary of State and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Colin Powell served as National Security Advisor under President Reagan. He witnessed the Reagans' powerful love story and their political partnership. General Powell is with us now from Washington. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you all?
Let's begin with intense memories of the time that you were there at the White House as National Security Advisor. How did you see her? And was she an ally for you? Was she a friend? How did you see her?
Well, remember, I came in at the last in the last 2 years of the Reagan administration, and the presidency was in trouble. He was in trouble because of Iran-Contra. And she was determined to help those of us who came in, myself, Frank Carlucci, National Security Advisor, Howard Baker, and Ken Duberstein in the Chief of Staff's office. And she was a friend and ally, and she could be an adversary if she didn't like what was going on.
Can you give us an example of that?
She was a dominant presence in the White House. A good example of that is once, the Don Reagan case is a classic example when she knew that Don Reagan had to be moved on as Chief of Staff and bring in Howard Baker. She merely leaked it to the press, and the press had it on CNN. I was the Deputy National Security Advisor, and my boss, Frank Carlucci, said, "Have you seen television?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I wonder if Don knows." And it was Frank Carlucci who went down to Don's office and said, "Don, did you resign? It's on television." And Don looked up bewildered, and he immediately wrote his resignation letter, took it to the president's office, and left the White House.
Wow.
That's hardball, fellas. That is hardball.
And General Powell, you tell a great story that if she was gone for too long, those of you in the White House would say, "We need to get her back here." How much did he depend on her? Tell us about that.
It was total, and you said it earlier in the setup piece. Without him, without her, there was no complete him. And whenever she went to New York to shop or visit friends and other interests, we knew after about 24 to 48 hours, he started to become fretful. He started to become distracted. And on the third day, we would have a little meeting. Somebody call up there and tell her she's got to come home. It was that direct. You could see it. It was visible. And he was incomplete without her presence. And I saw it throughout that 2-year period I was privileged to serve with him. She was tough, but her toughness always related to taking care of her man, her Ronnie. And it touched us all deeply. And after they left the White House and I left the White House, we stayed in touch. And she became much more mellow in the after period. And Alma and I spent some pleasant time with them out at the library. And I'll never forget visiting them at their home in Bel Air with a young soldier who had driven me there, and went up to the door, knocked on the door. President Reagan opened the door. Nancy was right behind him, and the young soldier saluted President Reagan, and Reagan saluted him back. And then the soldier went back to the car. Reagan closed the door, and he said to me, "Is it okay if I still salute?" And I said, "Mr. President, don't ever stop." And Nancy was just standing there beaming and smiling. So she was an indomitable presence. She really completed the man.
And what was it about him, Colin?
Well, Charlie, you know him as well as I did, but with President Reagan, you always had someone who had a clear set of goals. He knew what he wanted. Communism is bad. We're good. If only I can get Gorbachev to come out and see my ranch in California, all would be well. And so he so believed in America, and he created an image of America, that shining city on the hill, that touched all Americans, but touched our foreign allies as well. Even though some might say that Margaret Thatcher or Helmut Kohl or Mr. Mitterrand of France or Brian Mulroney knew more than President Reagan, or Gorbachev had greater control of detail. Well, President Reagan had us on his staff for the details, but what he had was he captured the spirit of America, and that's what touched all of those foreign leaders. So I think he was a remarkable man, but I got to say I'm prejudiced. I was with him every day for 2 years during difficult times. And the wonderful thing about Mr. Reagan is that he always was able to sort of look beyond today. Look beyond today. One short story, when in 1988, when the Japanese were buying everything, you'll recall they bought Rockefeller Center. They even bought the Pebble Beach golf course. We were to be spared nothing.
In Hollywood Studios.
And Hollywood Studios. And the cabinet marched in to complain to the president. We've got to do something. Congress is mad. The American people are mad. The Japanese are buying everything. And President Reagan sat there. He asked a couple of questions. And then he merely looked at them and said, Well, I'm glad they think America's a good investment. The meeting was over. The meeting was over. They all walked out saying, why didn't I think of that?
Good imitation, General.
That was him.
Yeah,
that was him.
That reminds me.
And of course, the Japanese lost all their money.
Yeah. That reminds me, General, that Nancy Reagan said of her husband he was the most optimistic man that she had ever met, and that was how he was governed. I want to ask you about the current state of this campaign, because Reagan, of course, is often credited with saying, "Thou shalt not speak ill of any other fellow Republican." What do you make of this current campaign?
I think the campaign has gone into the mud. I mean, the comments that they're making toward each other, the nastiness, it's running us into the ground. The foreigners of the world looking at this are distressed. I just came back from overseas. I was in Africa, and they're scratching their heads. What is going on? Can't they debate the issues? Politics is arguing, and there are debates, but this nastiness, they really have to stop it. And I hope with Mrs. Reagan's death and the mourning period we'll have for the next few days, it might influence these gentlemen to stop with the nastiness, get on to the issues. The American people really want to hear about the issues. Let's not make this a reality show. I know you're in trouble when Jerry Springer even thinks it's over the top.
Oh, yeah. God. Well, we've heard you say that you've endorsed Barack Obama the last two campaigns, but I forgot who you said you're endorsing this campaign, because you said you're still a Republican. I missed that news conference. Who did you say?
I haven't had a news conference yet, Gail. You haven't missed anything. As I always do, I will watch the campaigns unfold, watch the conventions, and I always vote for the person who I think is best for America at that time. I'm first and foremost an American concerned about this country, deeply in love with this country, and political party has to be set aside when I'm deciding who I'm going to vote for as President of the United States.
General Powell, thank you so much for joining us.